Hi, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and virtual production, whatever questions you may have. The next hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to talk about our coverage of Cinegear and NAMM. Some of it we're going to start getting into more and more coverage as a group, and we're going to talk a little bit and brainstorm about what we want to see and talk about any questions that you may have and any suggestions that you may have as well. So stay tuned for that. And if you'd like to see our schedule, again, go to officehours.global. All right, let's jump into the questions. Bill?
The first one comes to us from David Brady in New York City this morning. David says, Apple recently announced it's killing the iPod. I've enjoyed the touchline and have used them for podium timers, digital signage, and remotes for home entertainment systems. Let's take a moment and reflect on the impact that this device had.
Now go ahead, Bill.
I think there's been a tremendous, that really changed the music business seminally as a product, because everything before that, there was a mess, MP3s, piracy, a lot of those things. And I think the genius of that product when it first came out was combining everything. It was not the cheapest thing out there, but it combined everything in a system where you could legally license your music. It was small enough. It was, the capacity was big enough where I think without that, Apple might have been a very different company. So I always tip my hat to all the iPod things. I'm sorry to see it go. Its time clearly has gone, because now when I run or walk, my watch and a pair of AirPods are all I need to take out. I don't even take a wallet or anything else. So the technology has long since gone past iPods, but I do think it deserves a tip of the hat as a foundationally changing product.
I have to admit, I didn't know it was still around. Like I saw the announcement. I was like, "There's still making those." Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I think the combination of iTunes and iPod was the game changer. That was the product that changed everything. I'm a little bummed because I've got an older iPod in my car with the 30-pin connector on the bottom of it, and it's supplying all the music in my car. And I'm not sure if I buy a new one, if you've got a Lightning to 30-pin adapter that will work. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Go ahead, Courtney.
Let's think for a minute on the impact that it had on Apple's marketing, because that is the reason they probably killed it. Since the iPod Touch lets you run all the apps that run on your iPhone without the phone part. So few people use the actual telephone part of an iPhone these days. I'm sure they thought it was cutting in as a low-cost alternative to the iPhone, so it was cutting into their iPhone market. So, hey, you could do everything on the Touch that you can do on the iPhone. Let's kill the Touch.
I forgot about the Touch. We bought lots of them specifically for that reason. I don't need to pay sell. I don't need all the extra stuff. I just need something. Oftentimes we use them for stuff like Unity or Agent IC or other things like that, because they were the perfect thing to kind of connect and just go. Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I had a thing called an Arcos jukebox before it came out. People may remember. I just found it on Amazon, still available for sale for $80. I see. Which was how I did my MP3. So when the original iPod came out, I did what most young technical people do. I did a feature-by-feature comparison. Couldn't work out why for a second this would be interesting, until, I think as Mitch said, I learned that there were two things that Apple really, I think, crystallized around at that time. One was the hardware-software interface. So the iTunes, for all the things that was wrong with iTunes, with my jukebox, I'd be trying to copy files from directories to directories. And I think they changed that UI as a thought. Yeah. And the second thing they did was on marketing, they said it's 1,000 songs or whatever it was in your pocket. And that also changed the way that marketing around consumer products happened. And so when you look back on that product, it is foundational because, well, those things had never not been done before. They created a shift that is what today you see in the iPhone.
Yeah, Jeffrey.
Long live Zune.
So here's the funny thing. I was spelunking in my garage again, and I found my Zune player. I've got, I would get, because of MacBreak and stuff, I would get different players, and I pulled it out. I was like, oh, what? I used this for like 10 seconds, and there it is, sitting in a box in my garage. Yeah, I think it's kind of amazing. I don't know if Apple will be around, to be honest with you, without the iPod. I think the iPod set everything else up. It changed their revenue, dramatically. I think on computers alone, I don't know if they would have now. I mean, they now have because of all the money coming in from the iPhones, which came in because of the iPod, they now have this great new hardware that they're putting out. But for a long time, I don't know if it was competitive enough to make it work. There was those of us who loved it and stuck with it, but I think that they would have had a really hard time without the iPod. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
There were some missteps in the line. Remember the iPod clip, the one that had no display,
I had that.
and you clipped it on, and it was
It was good
impossible
for
to
flights.
navigate
It was
songs.
It was good for flights. I once went to Jamaica. It was a last minute thing, and was offered hey, do you want to just go and hang out at a Sandals? My wife said you can't take any electronics, and the only electronics you would allow me to take was one without a screen. So I had that little iPod. That's all I had. That and The Economist and unlimited daiquiris. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. He says, what specific AWS, Amazon Web Services are used most in our industry?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, there's a ton. If you actually scroll through, there's hundreds of services that they offer. The ones that I would say that are used the most in our industry are the S3 for storage. That's also used for web pages and whatnot. And a lot of people put like PDFs and host other larger files for their websites. The one that we use the most, Jonas Tucker, kind of our cloud squad, is the EC2 instances, which are basically server machines. And you can get them from wimpy little machines all the way up to what they call bare metal, which is a whole server rack full of a lot of capacity. Usually those are sliced and diced up, and you're renting just a piece. Like we rent the GPU instances that are about $1.50 an hour. The next thing is Media Connect or Media Live. Those are for transcoding or bringing things in. Like I have the Elemental link behind me. That's how I get it up, and then I could shoot it over and either host it myself through Amazon or shoot it over to YouTube or Vimeo or somewhere else. The other thing that we're running into right now, is that those GPU instances are scarce, and a lot of people are having problems firing them up. So yesterday, some people couldn't do shows because there's no availability. So I'd also be looking at Google Cloud. We've gotten Google Cloud to flow NDI. So again, it's just a server machine that you're renting, but the hard part is getting the GPU instances because all these crypto miners are using GPUs to mine. So they're getting gobbled up. And then the last would be Azure. I'd also be looking at Microsoft Azure. I haven't gotten NDI to flow over there, but if you just need a machine. Actually, there's one more, Douglas, because I know you want to just kind of play with this stuff. For those out there that just want to dabble in this and not spend a bunch of money, Chris Widener turned us on to Shadow PC, which is $29 a month. It's a gaming platform, and I've installed vMix on it, and it does work. It's a pretty wimpy machine, but it is $29, and you can install vMix for free, 60-day trial. So if you want to get to seeing what cloud computing is like, get Shadow PC, get a vMix license for free, and then use Video Ninja. That's also free, and you could pump in a source from remote, like your phone, just using Lyrics or using Video Ninja. Yeah, so give it a shot.
That's great. John?
The gentleman from Seattle covered it all. So EC2 is Elastic Cloud Computing, which I've been using for 15 years, which allows you to grow and shrink ad hoc.
That's great. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Andy Kokendorfer in Vera, Florida. He says, live closed captioning is his topic. Is there a lower cost method of embedding 608, 708 captioning than sending it through a costly Link Electronics caption encoder? Is there a way to scrape Zoom captions? Thanks.
Yeah, so the Link Electronics is not probably, I know that it looks expensive. It's actually the less expensive version of hardware encoding. The one that we had EEG on, and EEG 492s and 491s are the most popular solutions when it comes to hardware. And the advantage of hardware is that it's able to sit in a rack. It's able to insert things into it. So for broadcast, it becomes very useful, and it's very reliable. You can use a thing called iCap to attach an actual person, or have it sent out to Falcon. I think it's Falcon, what they're calling it. Now, EEG was bought by AI Media. So what you want to do is look at AI Media. They do a software solution. So that can be either, so what you do is you RTMP to them, they'll insert it, and then send it out to your end destination. So that's another way to do that. And it is less expensive than having an expensive piece of hardware. You're paying as you go. But it's, so the advantage of the 492 is that 491 is that you have it, but you still need a captioner, or you need some kind of AI to do that for you. So but it's less expensive to do that live is use the AI media tools. Now they're using either, again, AI, or they're using what we call respeaking. So respeaking, if you think about it, the most expensive version of this is a stenographer going out to a piece of hardware. The next one down is what we call a respeaker. They will listen to it. Someone's on stage talking. They may not have great audio. They may have, a little headset mic or a lav. You have another person in a controlled environment with a good mic that has been trained to them basically with something like Dragon software. And then they just literally listen and respeak it into a clean environment. And then AI turns it into something that's very accurate if they do it well. Then there's AI, which is less accurate, but getting better every day and doing a pretty good job. So those are the things that you want to look at. Now there's an Amazon service that will do it for you as well, just a raw Amazon service. You can also use, this will be a little nutty, but we have used it when we didn't have any money, is you can use Google Meet, and it has a captioning piece at the bottom. And if you put that over, you kind of square it up over top of a plain background, you can key that over, and the Google Meet is remarkably accurate. So we have seen people do that. We've done it once or twice. I mean, normally we put real captions in, but that's another way to do it. It's easier to take it out of Google Meet than it is out of Zoom. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. He says, would an interface between Unity Intercoms and conventional land mobile radio systems be useful for productions in remote areas?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely, I haven't done it with Unity. I've definitely done it with ClearCom. ClearCom builds all the hardware that you need to literally, you can take, this is a Motorola, and there's a ClearCom, 2-wire, 4-wire that you can just clip onto where you'd put the earpiece. In the Motorola, and there's like a data connection for that for some of the Motorola's, and you just leave it open, and then from then on you can hear and talk with those, and it's very useful because you do have places where it's better to have people have radios, and you can just attach them to the rest of your comms. Now it's obviously very limited to a channel. At least when we did it, it was limited to there's a channel that's the ClearCom. Most of us who do productions want to move to something a little bit more robust, like a FreeSpeak, ClearCom FreeSpeak belt packs. But there are times when the distance needs to be further. You need more walkie-talkies. There's a bunch of limitations to using a FreeSpeak for everything. Number of belt packs, number of transceivers, etc. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Alex Goldner in London. He says, Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference right around the corner now. What is your wish list for Apple announcements for developers, development tools, App Store changes, and OS features that would improve apps on the Mac, iPhone, iPad, Apple Watch, and Apple TV?
Go ahead, Nigel.
So the first thing is, I need you to stop fiddling with the iPhone interface, because I do technical support for my mother 5,000 miles away. And when you just fiddle with the graphics and move the buttons around, it's impossible to explain. So please do everything in a more advanced form, because I can't cope with that. I think the more important thing for me is, I don't want to necessarily run Mac OS on my iPad. I would like the continual move to eradicate the differences between the apps like Keynote on one and on the other, so that it's much more fluid. I don't care what OS runs on what. What I care is that the UI and the interface for those sorts of apps is much more similar, so I can switch without having to learn a different interface.
Yeah. Well, the Keynote, I think that's interesting, is that I want to be able to load the M1 version of the Mac onto the iPad. Like, just choose to go, if I want the iPad version of Keynote, I can load it on either my M1 Mac or my iPad, but go the other way as well. I want to be able to load my Keynote, my Mac version of Keynote. I know that I have a mouse, for my iPad. I know that I have a keyboard, so I just want to move this one over here and use it the way I'm normally using it. And I can decide which direction I want to go. And I think that's a very valid idea. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I'm hoping they use the event to announce a new Mac Pro. Any guesses on what that's going to cost?
I have no idea. Jeffrey?
The M2 will probably be the big thing. The two things that I'm looking for is, one is there's still a lot of problems with moving things around. So when I go to work out, for instance, and I call up my HomePod Mini to call up music, it gets completely confused as to if I'm going from my phone and my watch. So I want that more seamless. The bigger thing is if the iPhone 14 is going to have 8K video, that Lightning port, which is still planned to stay on the iPhone, needs to be retooled dramatically so you can have throughput to send 8K video from the phone to a computer, because right now it's going to take forever if you do anything like that.
As someone who's experimented a lot with 8K, my only problem with it is there's nowhere to play it. Go ahead, Bill.
I'm astonished because for many years you had to be an attendee, you had to be a developer to get in there. I think starting 2 or 3 years ago, I can't remember what it was, they opened it up and it's all online now and anybody can go there. And I highly suggest you do that because the breadth of presentations, even if you're not going to learn something like, Swift or something like that, you do get a sense of how developers create these products. And the complexity in there, the astonishing number of different types of people all over the world who are working in this industry. And you also get hints about what is coming next because developers are often dealing with issues trying to solve problems that are going to turn into products that are going to affect our lives in 5 or 10 years as much as they affect it right now. So I just found it fascinating when, as just a member of the public, I could get in and sort through all those things and just sample some of the developer presentations or some of the Apple presentations to their developers. That was fascinating for me, and I love doing it.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I look forward to a iOS to Android cross-compiler. Mr. Cook, tear down that wall.
Well, I think that might be wishful thinking, but anyway. Yeah, so I think that the thing that I'm looking for is to see what happens with USDZ. So, and are we going to get a headset? We don't know. There's a lot of rumors about headsets and that they're getting closer to the Surface. And so, if every year we look at whether the headset is going to get released at because it'll be WWDC, because they'll release it. They'll probably have quote unquote a developer version of it, which will probably cost, my guess is $3,000 to $5,000. And they'll sell as many as they can make. Like it'll be developers, but it'll be, that they'll call it the developer version, but you pay $100 to become a developer, and then you pay $5,000 or $3,000 or whatever. But you'll be the cool kid on campus that has the 6 to 8K per eye, high frame rate thing with 2 M1 chips in it, that kind of thing. I mean, that's what the rumor is. So anyway, so it'll be interesting to see what happens, there. The thing that would impact my life the most would be USDZ to Keynote. Like that, literally, I do so many. I'm literally working in Pages in Keynote for the next 5 days. I spent the last 5 days in production. Now I gotta document it all. So, and the biggest thing is being able to put 3D models in there that people could theoretically move around. But most importantly, I can move them around in the slide. Just move them to where I want them. Create an angle, that type of thing. So it's hopefully we'll see something there. Go ahead, Bill.
I'm going out on a limb and projecting that there's not going to be a headset. There's going to be an Apple monocle. It's going to be one thing. It's going to have a beautiful Johnny Ives design chain that falls down one side and lies beautifully in your pocket of your shirt. So that's my prediction.
A very thin chain that keeps on getting caught on everything, but it looks amazing.
Unobtainium created. It's going to be fabulous.
Yeah, exactly.
And a conductor's watch.
It's going to have a Hermes connector to it somewhere, hidden in there. Yeah, exactly.
$14,000.
Sorry. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Nora Sargent here on the panel from Fullerton, California. Do we know if the ATEM Constellation HD is shipping? I wonder what the supply-demand looks like for that.
Go ahead, Guy.
I think that I've seen some of them coming out of Singapore already and landing in Asia because physically it's closer. So I know Jonas just got a shipping notification from his distributor in Germany. So they're coming across Europe, and we'll get them here in the U.S. In the next few weeks, just like we did with the Cloud Pods. We had a couple of the Hyperdeck Shuttles, those of you that ordered them from us. I saw shipping notifications yesterday. Mitchell's giving me a thumbs up, so his left. So the new stuff that was announced within a few weeks is coming mostly likely by air. It's not coming slow boat. So we should see those in the next couple of weeks now. And I know that for us, we have about, we ordered 20, and I see that 17 are already sold. So we're just waiting for them to come in and go. So.
At first, I know a lot of us were like, "Oh, why didn't they make them 4K?" But I think they're actually going to fit into that groove really, really well. It's a good market, and I still think that we're going to see a 4K grouping between the $5,000 and $10,000 range. Next question.
John Foltz is up next from Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. He says, I received my Blackmagic Cloud Pod yesterday. It's very fast, even on a 1 gig network. Easy to use. Any other thoughts from the panel about them?
I don't think enough of us have them yet, but once a couple more of us get them, I think we need to test it, build our little group for ourselves and put it together. So let us know if you have them, maybe just during the show or something. Hey, and we'll try to organize that and build a project together with it. Next question.
Tobias Moss in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Anybody from office hours attending VeeCon? That's VEE Con. Gary Vaynerchuck. I'm sorry, I'm messing up your name. Vaynerchuck. Thank you very much, Alex. Web 3.0 conference in Minneapolis. If so, what are you looking forward to? And DM me in Discord. So,
good guy.
Yeah, I'm still kicking around the idea with a friend of mine that happened to pick up 2 VeeFriends. So this is the interesting thing about NFTs is some people that do these high dollar conferences that are over $1,000, they'll have an NFT give you the access. So if you own an NFT, you get free access into that. Well, it's not free because you own it, but depending on the price you paid for it. So he paid like it was 1 ETH at the time, which I believe was around $2,000. And his VeeFriend went all the way up to like 30 grand. I mean, it was bananas, and I think they've crashed back down. But he has access now to give away these tickets to friends. So I just messaged him asking, hey, you got an extra ticket to VeeCon? So I'll see. I'll let you know if I'm going to go. I'd love to go just to mingle and see what that crowd's like. I'm on their Discord. I don't know if you're on their Discord, but they have a crazy Discord. Like it's there's a lot of people on there. So it's really taken off.
Go ahead, Noah.
Do we know the dates? How soon is it coming up?
I don't know it off the top of my head. I want to say it's in the next couple months, though. I remember looking at it a few weeks ago. I was driving with my friend who bought those because I couldn't fathom that he bought them for so cheap compared to what they were worth. It was like $2,000 to $40,000. That's like a heck of a run, you know. But again, it crashed back down. If you look up VeeFriends, you'll see what I'm talking about. There's some of them. There's like 5 different ones. They're different colors, and they give you different access. So some are like VIP that have like this turquoise like background. And some of those have gone up even higher than 40,000. It's bananas. Like it's fascinating. It's something worth peering into to see what's there, because it could be the future or it could not. I mean, that's the thing about these. It's a gamble.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware on the panel now comes up next. Now that Web 3.0 is on the horizon, what are you doing to prepare for it? He wonders.
Go ahead, John.
That's what I have to say. I've done very well in my career identifying new trends. I was early streaming, 1996, early in Bitcoin, 2010. We were mining, and this still seems like Second Life 2.0 to me. If you watch Zuckerberg, he's showing a bunch of stuff in their metaverse, and they're hiring designers to design the worlds, and they've got NFTs integrated in, and so I'm watching it closely.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, the main difference between 2.0 and 3.0 is it's a decentralized server, sort of like blockchain. So learning blockchain would be a good idea. The 2.0 that we currently use is a client-server relationship, and the data lives on the server that it's connected to. But with the new Web 3.0, it'll be totally decentralized and live all over the place. So that's the thing you got to learn if you want to stay with it.
Go ahead, Nigel.
So I'm more like John. I'm a little cynical about this. Decentralized computing, to the best of my knowledge, I've sold in 5 different formats over the last 40 years. And every time it moves slightly away from the center, we call it decentralized. I think it's still a marketing term. I think you have to think about these things. But what I'm looking for is the killer app, the killer scenario, the killer thing that's actually going to drive adoption for it. And I think mostly it's wishful thinking at this point.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I was going to say I'm just too old. I'm polishing up my Ethernet connections for Web 3.0.
I'm going to get myself an avatar. So I think that the challenges are going to be that there's so many challenges. They are. But I think that a lot of the drive in Web 0.3 is also looking for bigger multipliers. The problem is that things settle, and so things have settled. There's a lot of big players in the Web 2.0. It's hard for investors and people who have all this money that they were mining for the last 10 years. It's hard for them to find a place where they get high returns. And so, trying to build something new that's outside of that, I think part of that is to disrupt that and get to those multipliers that they're looking for in their investment. And so I think that that's, you know, and I think that it could work. The blockchain solves a lot of problems. I was thinking about digital cash in early 2000s because I was like, we need to get out of it. Anyway, long discussion about fiat currencies. Anyway, so and how do you make the transfer of value more efficient between people? And that's what you want to look for, is that it's, whether it's blockchain or something else, the transfer of power, the transfer of value between people is the thing that we have to, making that more efficient is always going to work, you know, to do that, but it has to be efficient and safe. And they haven't figured that all out yet. And the biggest problems you get into is, you know, reliability of knowing that money is real. Also inflation and you know, value stability. And, you know, the blockchain hasn't solved all of this. It's solved I know that the person has it, but the inflation and the stability are still big challenges in that area. As far as 1.3 goes, I think that one of the things that is complex is that we really need to see each other. Like, this has gotten much better. Like, you look at this panel every morning is amazing. I'm in so many meetings and it doesn't look anything like this, but I would much rather sit in a big room like after hours with lots of people with good audio and video talking to each other than I would looking at avatars, you know, and I think that there's something real, there's something connected to it. I don't think that we need it to be, I think the next version of Web.3 is going to be more communities like what we're pioneering, I would say, is on these online communities that we feel totally connected, you know, to each other. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, and just speaking of the human nature side of it, I feel like people can initially just be like put off by the whole 3.0 kind of concept and movement. But the reality, at least for me, is like a lot of my peers in the younger generation, right? People in their 20s or even teens, like, are fascinated by the Oculus Quest and using that almost on a daily basis. And so I think, like, whether our group of people all jive with it or not, it only needs to be a percentage of people. And it's in that early adoption phase of, like, you know, the pioneering is happening. And so I think as we get older, Courtney kind of touched on this, and I think it's the human nature side of stuff to kind of look past some technology as it comes up. But I think, you know, it just depends on if you want to stay connected to that new and you know, up and coming technologies and stuff. It's something that we should look at if you're into that.
My daughter for a long time has had a thriving interior design business on Roblox. So she goes around and so she goes in and people pay her Robux to do up their house. And she goes in and they give her a budget and then she goes buys a bunch of things and puts them all in there and everything else. But I will say that as her, you know, she's very interested in it as her social life started to take off. She's 12 and now she's got lots of friends and she plays in a bunch of bands and she's pretty cool. So her amount of time in Roblox has dropped dramatically. You know, like, and I think that the reason I say that is that I just noticed that if your life is working in the real world, then the virtual one becomes less interesting, you know, because the real one gives you something else that you can't reproduce. If it's not working in the real world, then the virtual one is a good escape, you know, for that. And so I think that creates a whole bunch of social challenges for that virtual world as well. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is kind of on topic here. Sweetwater says we function best as a unified team to justify requiring relocation for most roles, given the progress we've made as a community, and he notes Belfast, Mobley, and so forth. Do you think that teams can be unified even when geographically distributed?
Go ahead, Bill.
I do think they can be. They're different functions, and I've spent so much time in corporate America talking to everybody from senior execs down, particularly the line managers and the people who have to deal with small and medium-sized teams. There is something that gets disconnected about assessing the emotional temperature, I guess I'd say, about teams and paying attention to them when you're only seeing them through a camera and they can present themselves for the meeting and get ready for that and present. You're not getting as many of the subtle clues around that. And I'm wondering if some of the managers who are really frustrated with virtual work, it's because those tools that they used to be able to use to assess the people that they were working with and see whether their lives are going okay and whether they're, you know, on it or off it, are going away. Now, maybe there's a substitute for that, but I just think there's a lot of soft skills that people are going to have to adapt in this area to really go forward.
There you go, Jeffrey.
There's definitely an argument for both sides. The big thing is every time that I've been in with a team, I've found that my work has helped or done a lot better than going separate, because then I don't know what the other people are doing when we're talking in a virtual aspect. And then you got to wait for them to come on and say, okay, I'm working on this and go from there. But the other thing is they're not talking about going back into the building. They're just talking about relocating in the same area. So they could still run completely virtual, but they're still in the same area. So if they need to go over to somebody's office or get together in a group and have a team meeting, they could definitely do that.
Yeah, go ahead, Noah.
The community side of it is huge. And I think, before, essentially the world feels like it's getting smaller and smaller, like we're getting better connected, and communities like our community can form together and be our own little niche, whether that means we need to geographically live close to each other or not. Obviously we're across the world, but there is something to those in-person events, like at least right now, right? When we did OH Space, or we connect with people in the real world once we've had this long-term online relationship, right? And so I think that touch point is still important today, but I also realize like technology is continually getting better and better. And like what we have now versus 5 years from now for this telecommunication type setup is going to be completely different. But what I'm also realizing is we don't necessarily need 100% we don't need everybody to be on board with online. We don't need everybody to be on board with in person. Like we're going to see a bit of both for the different work styles that we have.
Yeah, it's funny watching this on the last project that I just finished over the last couple of days. I had a little bit of both. Where Tlaloc was, in Maryland, and Mickey is in Philippines, and there was something about it that I noticed was that it was seamless. Like I said, hey, can you move the lights over here, and then then we're talking about it, and there's incredibly complex routing going on, and we're just asking Mickey to do this thing, and he's just kind of like, and it's just like they're in the room. Like it just felt like it was seamless, and we didn't think anything of it. But then I also had Marcia sitting there in the same room as I am, and we're sitting there just talking about edits and process and framing and things, and it was a very casual conversation that I don't know if I've had that. I don't know if I've talked to Marcia that much in our entire time, working over the last decade, of us just sitting in a room, like waiting for things to happen and then talking about what we want to do and everything else. And so I think there's definitely value to both of those things. That happenstance of us just sitting waiting for something, but I think what I took away was I'd like to figure out how to make that more for the folks that are offsite. What we didn't have in the edit room was like a Zoom call, that was sitting there. And I think that would help, for all of us to be kind of sitting around talking about that stuff. So we're going to, we'll keep on evolving that. Next question.
Michael Smith is up next from Silverado, California. Says, Google event today. Are any of the panelists interested in it?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I am. I think I'm going to watch Leo's coverage on this Twig this week in Google, and I think they're going to be covering it live on the Twit TV network. So I'm interested to see what Google's going to introduce so that I can know what they're going to kill in 6 months.
So you just struck on why their presentations are not as impactful, is that Google really has built a culture that makes it very hard for anyone to commit to it, because they build stuff up and they have this kind of make things, see how they work, see if they work, and then throw them away. But people have to commit to something. They have to commit time. They have to commit resources. They have to commit all these other things to take advantage of what Google's releasing. And I think Google's big challenge is they've killed so many things, as Courtney astutely pointed out, that no one trusts them anymore. And so I think that that trust of, I don't know if it's going to be around. So then it used to be you'd wait 6 months after Google said something to see like, is this really going to happen? And so, I did thousands of events for Google. I used to stream Google I/O, manage the stream or my company did. And so it was, so we worked on the inside of that, where we're working with partners who are just, not sure, if it made sense, to do that. And, incredible teams, by the way, some of the best people in the world work on Google I/O. I mean, it's just the whole team on Google's production side is just amazing, and they're just and they're putting together these great shows. It's really a great show to watch because they put so much energy into it and so much effort. It's just fantastic. But the content, I think the big problem is that now no one knows, especially if it lasts 2 or 3 years and you kill it. Now people have their roots dug deep into this thing, and you kill that off, and it really hurts, And so I think that they're having more and more trouble making that work. Apple goes very slowly, but very rarely do they kill something. Like it's just kind of like they just keep working it, or they'll tell you they're evolving it here, and this is where you got to go. And they'll tell you for years that you have to go there, and they're not going to change the direction. Go ahead, John.
We had a watch party for last year, and it was awful. It was just awful. But I'm looking at the calendar. It says it started yesterday and also today. I have to go research and see what's going on. I was very disappointed in last year's presentation.
Yeah, I didn't see it. I haven't. It was funny. It was a big part of my life for a while, and then I didn't think about it anymore. Next question.
Liberty White in Atlanta, Georgia says, if you have a dormant YouTube channel, last post 10 plus years ago, less than 100 followers, what would you do? Start a new account, or are there benefits to posting on the existing account?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
If the content is exactly the same and you think that would benefit the 100 followers, then it's very possible. And those 100 followers are still active, then it's very possible. But there's a lot of factors that are involved. Do you want to keep it? Is it a personal account? Is it a brand account? Of course, 10 years ago, they didn't have that. So you'd have to say, is what I'm going to do going to be a personal thing? Is it going to be a branded thing? And if that's the case, then you might want to start thinking about creating something new and just deleting that page and start fresh.
Next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael. If the console is placed to the left or right, as shown in this studio tour, and he's got a link there, would there be any issues mixing live streams from the studio? And he notes this would be a room used for both live events and studio work.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, traditionally in a studio environment, the consoles in the center and the speakers are flanking, or if they're near field, down below. In that particular situation, if you're playing and you want to get a proper stereo image, probably wear headphones.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I don't think there's any downside if it's a stream. Front of house, which is the traditional designation for where the mixing position is in a live concert, front of house is almost always centered somewhere. You've probably all gone to a concert or something like that where they've literally taken and built out in the audience a platform for the mixing engineer to sit so they can hear the live sound component. But if there's no live sound component, then it doesn't really matter where you are, because what you're streaming can be just as easily monitored by headphones by somebody in the corner, and that's not going to affect their perception of what's going out to the audience. So I don't think there's any problem with it if it's purely for live streaming.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, if I were in that situation where he seems to have a lot of keyboards strewn around the room, and of course a lot of rack equipment on the other side of the room, an iPad-based interface to his mixing console would come in handy, that he could walk around the room with and still control levels with, and switch inputs would be very handy to have.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times those keyboards are used as, I don't know this for for all of the different studios, but the one I've seen it, the keyboards are used for inputs. Like you go there and you play it, but then you're playing that into a DAW, then you're working with it from there. You might be, being able to do everything at one time is not as necessary because you're playing with something and building that as a source. Next question.
Liberty White is right back from Atlanta with, I'm working on a YouTube marketing episode for a future Office Hours show. Who would you like to hear from?
Go ahead, Guy.
Well, the low-hanging fruit would be the folks that hang out in after hours. This reminds me of that Jeff Bezos thing where he would put an empty chair at the table and say, that's the voice of the customer. So you got to remember that customer avatar. Who are you wanting to watch this, and who's watching now? So for us, even the folks that don't have a camera that are just the text guys, I'd love to just see some of them represented via some text pop-ups or something that say, hey, get your question answered. Here's a question from A. Mitchell's or from Douglas Carmichael. So some of these people that may not pop on that have a face, that's what I would like to see. But that's just me.
Go ahead, John.
I'd like to hear from Marquez Brownlee and Mr. Beast, those two guys.
Nice. Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I definitely want to hear from the silent voices out there, and especially the people that can't make it and they watch it afterwards, and see what their thoughts on how they watch it, because they have the ability to skip back and forward. But the other thing is everybody that's done the second hours that comes on, like the Brian Vander Arks and stuff like that, so we can find out what really, if it helped them, how to help them, and how they're thinking about after office hours as a whole.
You go ahead, Bill.
I think you need to, I think you would want to avoid one of the primary mistakes, which is thinking that marketing is marketing, because it is really very different in different verticals. And I would look at some of those verticals. For example, if you are tasked with doing marketing for a manufacturing concern, it's very different than if you're tasked with doing that same job for a consumer products concern. You've got not-for-profits. You've got so many different areas in business that all need marketing and all want to be out and have social endeavors, but you may find that it's very different depending on skill set to skill set. So I would look for those verticals, interesting verticals, and saying, how do they adapt the principles of general good marketing into their vertical? And a lot of people can learn from that.
Next question.
Greg, looks like Griechmeyer in Topping, Virginia. Sorry if I'm getting your name wrong. Any new suggestions for getting AR-18 audio directly into the ATEM Mini via the mic input using the Art DTI Cleanbox? But we've hit the knobs twice. For your information, I can't run into a camera. So
Good, Mitchell.
Yeah, it's too bad you can't run into a camera. It's a quick and easy way to get it going. If you're looking for something that doesn't have knobs on it, that does the same thing as the Art, the Henry Matchbox will accomplish that without any knobs. There's sort of indented volume controls that you hit with a tweaker.
You go ahead, Noah.
Could we have your XR18 go into a computer and then go out of HDMI to get to the ATEM? Because I would rather do that than do the 1/8 inch in.
That's not a bad idea. A little bit of a delay there, but it might actually be better. Yeah.
Yeah, those
Next question.
preamps are so bad. It's just frustrating.
No, absolutely. Next question.
next one comes from Josh Kaufman here on the panel from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. How are the panel utilizing their HDMI Matrix and HDMI router splitters with your ATEM workflow? Have you found external scalers helpful for reducing resolution of in 4K sources?
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, and I guess the one thing I was kind of interested in is using an ATEM workflow. You tend to be 1080p, but kind of the mix between the 4K and scaling down. I've looked at some different devices, like there's a scaler that can take your 4Ks down so it can be reached by the ATEM processes. I've also seen some splitters that can do both, so it can send one to a 1080p to the ATEM and then something else to another one. I use a multi-view that's 4K enabled. I have a HDMI Matrix I'm using as well. So those are both 4K capable, but you can send 1080p sources to them. So I'm looking at getting some scalers involved to be able to meld that process to where the ATEM's happy, but I can still feed some of the 4K sources.
What 4K to 1080p did you show there?
This one is a scaler. It's just I don't even know the brand of it off of Amazon, but it's 1080p 60 to 4K to 1080p 60. I have another splitter I was looking at that'll split in one. Let's see, who is that? StarTech.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be interesting to look at. So the thing that I'm interested in with those scalers, and the thing you want to look at, is how it handles that scaling. So there is so does it just subsample, or does it basically actually resample the image? So if it resamples the image, it will actually look sharper on 1080p coming from 4K. If it subsamples it, what it does is just grabs every other pixel. Mm-hmm. What it tends to do is when you go from 4K to 1080p in that fashion, what you're going to end up with is more aliasing. So it'd be really interesting to see, and the way you can see that oftentimes is to have a monitor and try going back and forth between when the computer is set to 1080p versus when you go from 4K to 1080p, and see what it looks like. But you may notice that there's more aliasing on the less expensive boxes. What you wanted to do is resample the image. And in the high-end ones, really high-end ones beyond the Teranex, you can actually decide how you're going to resample it. And you can see that also in some of the scalers, like in compressor and other things, will ask you, there's like 5, in compressor, for instance, there's like 5 different scaling algorithms that are used to figure that out. And so, but I think that's where the rubber meets the road with a scaler, is how it's going from one to the other, as opposed to, I think that the less expensive boxes tend to just subsample, just grab every other pixel, and then you'll see more.
And
more
the splitter and the matrix both use the EDID to scale it down. So however that's working.
Right. Yeah, I think it's just every other. Noah?
Yeah, so I don't have any HDMI matrices currently, but the scaler that I use the most is the Decimator 4K version, and it's a $500 box, and it could take HDMI and downscale it to 1080 or whatever format you need it to. It is really expensive, but it's the catch-all utility knife that I have in my tool bag. I feel like there's a hole in the Blackmagic line with like a 4K switcher, right? And something that could also do HDMI and SDI at 4K. So hopefully that will be a product in the future.
Yeah. The decimators are great for scaling. I don't have a lot of the 4K ones because I haven't had needed those specifically. The one other challenge with them is they do add a bit of latency to the video as they go through. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael has an interesting idea here. ShareGrid allows verified professionals to rent camera equipment amongst themselves in an Uber-style model. Could you see a DVER rentals or DVE share, with apologies to Guy, model disrupt the conventional rental house model in the low-end market?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, a few years ago, I was at NAB, and this gentleman came up, it's called parachute.io, and he brought up this term that hit me. It was access economy. He was talking about Airbnb and Uber and how this new generation doesn't want to own it. They just want to borrow it or rent it. And so as I look at Office Hours 2.0 and the system Alex was talking about, Constellation and Format Minis, and it looks expensive. And so what's going through my mind and some other people is just like, how can we use this, like tokenize it or something to where you can rent expensive stuff, but you don't pay money, you just earn it somehow, in our community or other communities. So there's a lot of thoughts. I'm sure we'll discuss this stuff as the future goes on, but I like the idea of having some of our TDs and people behind the scenes earn the right to kind of do their own shows. Like maybe if we are going 24 hours a day, I buy an Office Hours 2.0 system, somebody else buys one. Now we have like redundancy, and we have shows going 24 hours a day on not just birding, but photography. And as you walk through your local Barnes & Noble and see all those magazines, there's a lot of topics out there that could have a whole show: golfing, cooking. I mean, the list goes on, but I would love a way for this to, not cost somebody $100,000 in FSHDRs and all this crazy AWS stuff. Because, some of us have access to this stuff, but it's not being used 24/7. And I would love to just be able to hand over the keys, so to speak, and let somebody else take advantage of it.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I think, as someone who learned mostly in the rental side of things, in other words, in my early days, I literally could not afford to pay the money for the larger cameras that I wanted to get to know. So the rental houses that I became very friendly with became my salvation, really, because I could, the ones that knew me would allow me to take it 3 days before the rental began so I could start to understand the menu systems, because these are complex things and it takes getting up to speed on how they operate more and more here in the future. I'm a little leery of what I used to call the users group model, with people just borrowing each other's stuff. I think there needs to be a little more formality in there, because it is so easy to have something get misset or break. I've had circumstances where I've rented somebody else's camera and I look inside and all their metadata is through there. So everything I'm shooting is under their name, not under my name. And I had, I need to go in every menu and completely redo it and then take my information out of that electronic device as I pass it along to the next. Now, somebody like Guy, who completely understands the whole ecosystem, will keep that safer for us. But this ad hoc, I'm just going to trade stuff with my buddies, doesn't have someone like him in there that's looking out for your best interests. So I'm, again, just a little bit leery of that. There's a model in here. I'm just not sure I'm smart enough to know what it is.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, Bill covered most of what I was going to say. In a rental house, you have a rental manager that takes that piece of rental equipment, and every time it comes back in, they go through and reset it to its default settings and make sure that there's no leftovers from the previous renter on there. And if you do the Uber type method, maybe if you rent the equipment with the operator, and like Uber, when you expect that Uber to arrive, you don't have to learn how to drive the car that they show up in. They're driving the car. You just get in and go along for the ride. So if it comes with the operator, I could see that as a workable model. But if for just the highly technical equipment that's used for networking and streaming, there are just too many variables to get something, borrow something from somebody else who's been using it for something else and then having it work right off the bat, unless you're extremely familiar with that equipment. And if for you to be extremely familiar with it, you'd probably have to own it anyway. So
Go ahead, Mitchell.
And you're seeing a recurring theme here is that there's a lot of fiddly parts, particularly in a camera and in the lens. And if somebody messed with the shims, put different shims on the lens, there's all kinds of weird things that can happen. So getting it back to its original condition is a tough thing for anybody, whether you're renting it or borrowing it.
A good guy.
Yeah, the part about resetting, so we've been looking at vMix in the cloud. I actually bought the domain name and started doing some stuff with, it's called CloudFormation. So CloudFormation is a way of rebuilding. So we would basically tear down the system and then just give you a fresh one. So if somebody tweaked anything, because there's very real danger in having somebody install some piece of software that's a keyboard tracker or whatever, or streaming to somebody else's channel on accident. So that stuff's very real. So that's the way we handle it, is just tear it all down, rebuild it, and then it's a fresh start.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing that I thought about for a long time, and the stage that we're playing with right now is kind of the prototype of that. That was a dream for a long time, and now it's a prototype, is the idea of maybe a shared environment. So like Office Hours 2.0 is kind of a shared environment. Someday it might end up in the cloud. Right now, putting all of that processing in the cloud, and especially for what we're doing, would be difficult. So it's all hardware, but we're trying to make it more available to more members to be able to do their own shows using what we're learning how to do. Then the stage is the idea. Well, eventually we might end up with a bunch of cameras and a bunch of lenses and all the stuff that we need in that stage, and we all share the access to the stage. And there's people who can be there remotely, people who can be there physically, and someone might build up and say, "Hey, I want to do this project," and the stage is available for. Maybe you build up points or something by being on the panel and being helpful in after hours and doing other things. And you can say, I now have enough with all of us. We can put our points together and take over the stage for a week, and do things with it. So that's kind of the, one of the things, and being able to have multiple stages and that type of thing is something I've thought about for a long time. So when we experiment with office hours concerts and projects in there, it's thinking about that, like how would we do this, on our own at some point. Next question.
Noah Sargent, Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana, says, I was looking at one of my YouTube channels and found some Google Hangout streams from 2014. When do you prune old content?
Jeffrey.
I personally don't prune content unless it negatively affects anything. I've actually had a couple interviews where CEOs, there was one CEO who was a CEO, and a few years later, I was asked by the company to take it down because the CEO, well, we won't get into that, but the whole point is he was gone. And so they asked me, they ended up giving me more content. So it all worked out in the end. It's really up to you, in that whole rule of kind of getting put in the corner. It just is one of those things that could come up later. Like, for instance, the iPod thing with the iPod coming down. I wouldn't be surprised how many searches are being done for Apple iPod right now, and somebody's video from 2005 or something like that could be played 100,000 times and get viral.
Go, Josh.
Yeah, I think I'm in Jeffrey's camp as far as not pruning things. If you look at this guy in 2009, this is Marquise Brownlee doing one of his early HP laptop reviews. And if it's something that changes your theme, or if you've changed the channel to something that's going differently than it's gone before, then that might be a reason to remove the content. But if just to prune it for the sake of tightness, well, a lot of content creators don't seem to be in that camp.
Next question.
Noah Sargent, Fullerton, can a rack-mounted X32 be controlled by an X32 compact?
Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, my thought behind that was I have multiple carts and they need different inputs, right? And so the thought is, like, I could have the rack on another cart and still mix from a second cart and then still use that cart independently, something like that.
I think you could probably find a way to pass OSC between the two of them because they support that. So you could probably find a way to relay it. It wouldn't be a direct control, but it definitely, I think, is possible to do that. Typically you would use an X-Touch, to control the rack. Or the other, or I think that would control both of those. But I think that figuring out some way to do some kind of OSC handler could possibly make that work. Next question.
The physical fader. Sorry, yeah, the physical faders is the thing that always gets me because the X-Touch, right? Or does it have?
No, the X-Touch is the physical faders for the rack.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, and you can do a lot of things on networking. We've done things where we had, like, let's say 6 rooms that we're covering audio for. And we just learned to bring all the engineers to one room. We would tie those all actually not into an X32, but a QL1 or QL5 or CL5, and have them all given their own faders. And then that allowed Brian to sit and oversee all the audio for 6 rooms, like just be able to check in and look at them. But you have individual people actually moving the faders around, and they're all sitting right in front of him, so he can go over and talk to them if it's. We found that easier because sometimes we have. There's a disease for that audio engineers often have that can grow up on them with fiddliness. Like they fiddle with things that you're just kind of like, okay, you just gotta, we're in a show. Let's not play with this anymore. So it's one of those things you have to kind of work through and be able to talk through. Next question.
Hershit in Daytona Beach, Florida says, speaking of presentations, I attended Ability Summit yesterday. Sadly, the CEO was on a poor mic situation. Firstly, it's hard to go back when you hear bad audio. What are your thoughts on conference room, miscellaneous situations, and or speakerphone audio?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Well, it's the main reason we're all here, isn't it? We're here to tell people that good enough is not good enough. I mean, that's just seems to be the excuse most people use, and it's particularly annoying to see that somebody that's visually impaired having to put up with bad audio. It just does. There's absolutely no excuse for that. So hopefully, little bit by more and more bits, we're going to be able to improve the quality of audio and video, particularly audio for these. We certainly do it here, but people just don't understand. And right. It's bad.
Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, I think one of our goals, at least for my company, is to minimize distractions and maximize impact, right? So when we have those things that become distractions, right, with the technology, it doesn't become transparent and it becomes just a headache for everybody involved. And so it's taking away from the message. And ultimately, when you're talking to C-suite folks or really any businesses as a whole, I try to use the same language that they would use and the same terms that they use to accomplish their business. And I think they'll realize that over time, hopefully.
Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
It's really impressed me how long we've been in a situation where we're doing this day in and day out, and we still encounter a lot of this bad audio. People that should know better or do it every day. And I think it just comes down to people. That's just what they expect. I think what it translates to people from our community and industry is it's an opportunity to show people that no, there is a better way to do this, and then that's a big contrast from what people have come to expect from these type of events.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to, it's kind of like when people say that they're obviously their audio and video are not very good, and they say, well, I know what I'm doing, I've done this, or I know how this works, this is how it works, and it's kind of like the person who's never played football talking about how Tom Brady should play. In the stands. They're just like, okay, you have no idea what you're talking about. And I think that they go out but the difference is that person gets to sit in the stands and have beer and drink a hot dog and have a bunch of opinions that are useless. But what we see all the time in these conferences is that person gets called out and gets to try to play. That's what you have basically someone who doesn't know what they're doing out there now trying to throw the ball around. And I really think that it painfully undermines authority for the C-suite folks that are saying that's what they don't get, is that when you don't look good and sound good, you are losing authority. And you can see loss of authority across corporate America right now. The employees are uprising. They don't want to go back to work. They don't want to do these things. They don't want to do all those things. They want the company to do this. That's loss of authority. That's a loss of that. And I'm going to argue a part of that is because they have bad audio and video. And I know that sounds like a crazy postulation, but I think that the bad audio and video mean they don't take their leadership as seriously. They don't follow it, and they are all, there's a lot of other things that are going on that have that happen, but I think that they just don't take them seriously. They think that they're, yahoos because of the way that they present themselves in these meetings. Next question.
Eduardo Augustine in Panama says, is the Hyperdeck Shuttle a good investment to do instant replay for a semi-pro American Football League, or should I try something different to achieve the same result?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I don't know yet. I'll have mine in my hands tomorrow, according to UPS. Yeah. But semi-pro, I think so. I think it seems to have all the earmarks of being a good piece. Professional, no. They have specialized software and equipment and people to make that happen.
Good, Courtney.
No. The answer. To do instant replay, you need something that can record while it's playing back, and the shuttle does not do that. You could record something and then go back and find it and play it back, but all during that time you're going back to find it, you're missing live action. So in a sports situation where they can't pause the action on the field for you to cue something up to play it back, it would be a bad choice. You might look into the 3-play system if you're looking for something a little lower cost than an EVS. That might do the trick for you because that has multi-channel record simultaneously and independent playback. So I don't think it would be a good choice for doing instant replay. And plus, it doesn't really have variable speed playback, so to speak, that's clean.
Yeah, I mean, at a lower cost, there's M Replay from Softron is another replay system that can do that for you. Then there's the 3Play, which is the next step up. Then Dreamcatcher from Everett's, and then EVS, which is what you see on TV all the time. I'll go with Josh real quick.
Yeah, and Eduardo, I think you have a software workflow at this point. You might look at vMix for their replay systems. A lot of people use those for sports.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael has the last one, I believe, before the top of the hour here. The Kia EV6 is an appealing choice for a mainstream electric vehicle for travel to and from events with equipment and mobile production. Would a Tesla Model X be a better electric vehicle choice?
I go ahead, Noah.
So ultimately, it's personal preference, right? Jeff Keithley did have an X or has an X for his setup and the things he does. My personal bias is towards Tesla because I'm a big Tesla fan as a whole, but it does have more space, more cubic feet. The Model Y might be a better choice price-wise, but for me, equipment-wise, I'm either in a truck, a van, or I have a trailer, right? So it really depends on the size of your kit and what you're bringing, but the final thought is availability. So whether it's the Kia or the Model X or whatever car you decide to go with, if it's electric, availability is going to be a tough thing over the next few years.
Last question for the first hour.
Yeah, I got that wrong. Matt Halverson, going to get him in for Brookings, South Dakota. I was given some footage that was shot on a Blackmagic design camera, but I don't know what picture profile they use. It's flat colors, and the info says ProRes442 LT. How can I find this out? I'm not able to ask the videographer.
Go ahead, John.
I run all these files through Invisor, and if you can't find out the information there, then good luck.
So it's not metadata. What you're seeing there, and it's going to be really unfortunate for you, is that they recorded log, so they recorded film to film with the LUT. So, but they recorded it in LT, which doesn't have a lot of data, doesn't have a high data rate. So the thing is that when you record log, it's trying to save your highlights and your shadows, and so it builds a soft knee so that it's kind of it's kind of like this. Well, that's a horrible one. It's more like this, and what happens is this contains a bunch of data in it that can be stretched up by your colorist later, so that it can be made different there. So these knees are the key to protecting what you have there, and that's why it's flat. It's flat because it's not linear like you'd have with straight 709, and so it looks very flat in the highlights, and it'll look a little milky there because of these knees that are built there. And it's film. Now, you don't know from a Blackmagic camera whether it's color science 3, 4, 5, et cetera, but you do know that it's probably that. But the problem is you need tons of bit depth and quality to pull this up, because basically it's how many stair steps between one gray and another gray, on any channel. 8-bit is only going to be 256 steps, while 10-bit is 1024, while it keeps on stacking up that way to where the 4096, et cetera. And so the issue is that you're going to have a hard time with that. like I'm just, and the way I handle this when it comes in is I bring that into, when I don't know what the color science was, I will bring it into Resolve, and I will go through the different lookup tables to see which one makes the most sense. That it's in the end, all that matters is it comes out looking like what you want it to look like. So you're going to go through and if you can't go back to the videographer and ask what color science were you using, which camera, which updates, then I'll usually start at version 4, and because that's common across most of the cameras, and take a look at it and see, does that look normal? Can I color correct from there to where I want to go? Bill, real quick.
Your one hope is that the videographer shot better and they gave a transcode to the client. He gave that to you. Other than that, you're sunk.
Yeah, I wouldn't say you're sunk. You pull a lot out of it, but you do have some challenges. It's not gonna. If it's at 4K and you only need 1080p, you might be better off. There's a bunch of things. I don't know if you're sunk, but it's definitely going to be a challenge.
For recovering, though, if you can't get back to a better original, you're hobbled a bit. The
LT doesn't have a lot of data. Just as a note, you never want to record anything in film, in the straight film without a lookup table. You never want to record anything in less than HQ. So HQ should be your base of what you should be recording in, because it has enough bit rate for you to actually recorrect that. The 444 is better and blah, 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 but HQ should be the minimum that you're trying to record if you're going to ProRes, if you're going to color correct it later. All right, let's jump into the second hour. So we're going to talk a little bit about covering. We've got some big, we thought about it a couple of weeks ago, and now we're running out of time. So we're going to talk, we need to really start pulling this together. We put out, if you look at the emails that we send out every morning, there's links to sign up for this. And Noah's going to start reaching out to people this week. But we're starting to brainstorm about what we want to do. We potentially have a live view that might be available to us to work with, thanks to one of our members. I will confirm it before we commit him to it. And I think that we're going to start brainstorming about what we'd like to do, and how we'd like to cover it, based on the learnings that we had on the last one. We are going to talk about these every week, just so you know. This is like every one day a week. We're going to be talking about this as we get closer, so that we can really kind of nail this down and make it work. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to say, just start us off, super excited about the event and all the feedback we've gotten. It's close to 25 people for each of the 2 shows that we're looking at, coming up, obviously, in a few weeks. So, I do personally have a 850 hard out, so the conversation will keep going without me at that point, but I just wanted to put that on everybody's radar. I like to think of the show like starting from the wide, moving to the tight, in the sense of, right now it's kind of vague, but as we get closer to the event, we're going to start locking in details. And so we're going to want input in the beginning, but eventually when we get close to the show, we're going to ask for less input and get less input. And you'll probably hear me say, that's a great idea. We'll have to implement that on the next show and not this show. And again, our goal is to, our goal is to do this often, every 2 or 3 months, max, with a maximum gap of 2 or 3 months. So we'll iterate. The one thing we will do is, when in doubt, we're going to throw it out. We're going to, it is, if we don't think we can pull it off, we're going to pull back, and do something really well. So the big thing is that when you're doing these kinds of events, what we want is to create a calling card that is what we're going to show people for the next one. This is what we're going to do. We're going to learn a bunch of new things, but we want quality content that inspires people to potentially, give us some gear and give us some other things and allow us to do this, and, possibly sponsor it. All those things are things that we want to stay conscious to. And what that requires is not being super creative. It's looking at small things and being really good at them. So we're going to work on that. Now, we are going to be creative in a way that we're going to cover this stuff, but no one's covered. I think that potentially we can cover these events better than almost anybody's ever covered them. Most of the time, people are trying to find the shiny face, the person has broadcast experience that doesn't know anything about the equipment.
I got repeated comments from NAB with all the troubles that we had and all the things we're trying to figure out, that it was the best content this year covering NAB, and so the team that worked on that did a great job. They crushed it. And what we want to do is file off some of the sharp edges, get the thing, move the quality up, but create that expansive, geeky, nerdy approach to, how we're doing this, and then we'll take notes again, and then we'll plan another one, and we'll do them. But we don't need to get all of it in one time, because we're going to keep doing these. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Noah, based on what you were saying about, taking input, one of the things that I think was interesting doing the rocket launch is there's a transition point that it doesn't have to be a moment, but it's definitely has to happen where you dream, you think up some ideas, you build on those ideas, but there's a point where you just have to start executing on those ideas. And we saw that in the rocket launch, where there was a certain point where it's like, hey, we have to start doing this stuff now. We could talk about it all you want, but now we have to start executing. And that's like probably your main job is getting that stuff to the point where we're saying, these are the things that have to be done. These are the things that have been completed. These are the things that still need time. Like what we were doing, keeping in track of things that were scripted, things that were edited, things that needed, again, going back to my application I always want to build.
Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, my little cheat sheet or thought perspective is like, I want to create a space where people can give me feedback uninhibited, right? So I can get as much info as I can, but at the same time, I want to still be able to make the decision of like where we're going and what we're doing. And I'm going to, get advice from the people that I trust and that I have high respect for, but they also trust me as the leader in the sense to help make that final decision. But a couple other things I wanted to say. So boots on the ground teams, it looks like we have 7 or 8 folks signed up for each event, which is great. So we could have 2 teams of, 2 to 3 people, hopefully, if that works out. And I also like to think of productions as building blocks, right? So we need the boots on the ground building block. We need our virtual team, right? We need our producers. So as those things form, we'll start to develop the show as a whole. And there is also a difference between like private conversations and then like today's like more of a public forum, right? So if you have anything that you want to take directly to me, feel free to reach out and we can talk more about it. But those are kind of the thoughts I had.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
So doing that part for the last 12 years now. And I've done it in my own capacity. I've done it with the group, doing it live, doing the show floor, of course, doing NAB. The one thing that's always the factor is knowing how to take what you're doing and then realizing it's not going to work, and then taking that shoestring, the gum and the string, and putting it together so it works for now. And getting some stuff out. We did have some technical issues. It was all last minute. And in all reality, the rig that I had, although it's very decent for doing a recording, it was not perfect for doing a Zoom. And if I would have been able to have a little bit different situation, that would have changed dramatically. And my video would have looked really as well as Keith Lee's did when he was on the air. But you're going through that show floor, like for instance, NAMM. I'll give you a perfect example right here. I'm going to show you a video. This is me doing a roadie. It's a guitar tuner, and I can't play the audio because it is just, I don't want to say horrible, but I had to take the attenuation, turn it all the way up. It is super loud.
You don't want to say horrible, but it's unlistenable.
No, you can hear it. You can hear it. It's just there's just so much going on in the background. It's tough to do. And yeah, of course, that was also 5 years ago. Technology's changed on that. So we'd have a better job on that. But it's little things like that you have to take into account when we're doing, especially doing the floor stuff. You never know when somebody's going to pass by, all of a sudden run right into your camera rig. You don't know when something's going to happen, the lights turn out, and next thing you know, you're in the dark for about an hour, like happened in CES 2018. You just don't know, and then you've got to work your way to keep the audience entertained as that happens.
You go, Josh.
Yeah, I like the feedback that we've given about planning this event and just thinking about the comments that have already been made. Alex talking about not being too creative. And the nice thing is a lot of the shows that our community has done have been one-offs with the OH Space and the Giga and the Tesla event. They were the first of their kind. And so I think the nice thing that I'm looking forward to is doing the second show, redoing the event. To Chris's point about the cutoff points, perhaps those cutoff points could be planned rehearsal or rehearsals where you make certain benchmarks and then we practice what we have in enough time to change what we need to change before the event starts.
Good. Noah?
Yeah, there's something that Sky and I were talking about a couple days ago is like the difference between like managers, like people who like a repeatable process and they make that happen versus like pioneers, somebody who's developing and discovering and learning and building a system as we're going. We're essentially still in that pioneer phase where everything is new. And I know some of our natural tendencies is to be like, well, how do we repeat the system? But like we need the system to be built first. So I really appreciate people's patience. I know it's different than. Go ahead. Sorry.
And, I agree. And the thing is, I do a lot of, most of my job is to do things that no one's ever done before. So I live in this kind of world of we have to do these things, but I do that by being extremely conservative about everything I can be. So you'll find that this is why I don't like NDI. I don't like cloud at the moment. I love watching you guys do it, but when someone's going to pay me, I pull my elbows in and I go, this is how I'm going to do it. And I do now, but I keep on adding things. Like now my whole facility is run by Mickey in the Philippines, and I'm kind of used to that now. But it took a while for us to do it in experiments and for us to figure that out and figure out what worked and didn't work before it became something that it just became common to do that. And so the thing is that we, I like to do things over and over again and figure those out, but I'm very, very, very conservative about doing crazy things. So one of the things we want to think about, it's not so much we don't want to be creative, but we want to be just careful of adding too many variables at one time. And that's what I always try to do, is minimize the number of variables or have things that we can always fall back to. So if we end up with a live view there, we have, and my hope is that we use a, if we get the live view with HEVC and HDR and so on and so forth, my plan is to do this 4K HDR 5.1 possibly, but push it all the way out. That means that all the stuff, anything we play back and everything else that we do is all very, very, high. So that's one big push, because that's never happened before. And if people see live feeds from the floor, that quality, it'll be something, and so, but I think that, and what I've been really thinking about is having something that we're going to lean on heavily, like a live view or something like that, with a good camera rig, and that's probably where we put most of a bunch of our energy, that we're going to make that work. Having a lot of things that we can fall back to, which is pre-recorded stuff, and then iPhone rigs. Like I don't know if I want to try to do two, things, but like have little iPhone rigs that are very well kitted. So I mean, I've kitted up some pretty high quality iPhone rigs, with these, and I'm really excited with what Tom had shown us on Ferguson and showed us these I think feel like the core of that metal quarter 20s on every side, high quality, capture devices where we can build them all up, potentially have them on Zoom, and maybe have one other rig if someone really wants to experiment with that. But with each rig, we should be looking at them being rock solid, using industry standard equipment, and we'll see. There's people who have already pinged us about, hey, can I donate some money to the cause to do this project? And I can put a little money into it. We can rent gear if we need to, but we're not going to do. The one thing I really recommend is that we not try to do anything. We don't have our equipment pipeline be creative. The equipment pipeline should be industry standard kind of stuff, because and then we can get creative about how we're using that stuff to move forward. That's my recommendation. We don't have to go down that path, but my recommendation is to be very conservative about the hardware that we employ.
And I threw a question in for boots on the ground bog kits, so we can talk about that later in the hour here.
Yeah, let's go to the next question.
Next question comes up from Noah Sargent in Fullerton, and he says, do we know if I can bring a cart with wheels to Cinegear and or NAMM, or a stand with wheels?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I'm not sure sometimes they do have restrictions on you have to get a press pass, but I just came up with an idea. What about they always have to allow scooters or wheelchair access? So what if you get a scooter, rent it, you can rent them in LA and you can rent them at most venues. And then you just mount all of your equipment. You figure out either handlebar mount or something will go in that basket on the front and you could even hire a disabled veteran to drive it for you. And they will always make room for you. And you've got a good source of 12-volt DC power that you can power all the equipment off of.
Yeah,
just drive it around, drive it right up, put a Ronin 4D in the front of it. And
talk about the letter of the law instead of the spirit of the law. Ruin it for everybody. Suddenly there'd be no carts allowed.
You could employ a disabled veteran to drive it. Come on.
Okay, you go, Bill.
I like the idea. I love it.
That was just brilliant. I've taken various rigs and carts and covered NAB with it. The press pass thing that Courtney mentioned actually I think is a pretty serious thing, because I'm not sure that just a regular pass is going to allow us to get in to get some of the help that we need with a 3-person crew through there. So I just think that's something we should think about right now, because it usually takes a while to get in that system.
Once we know who we want to put in those positions, I'm going to reach out to them and see if we can't sort that out. It's very odd how many people know what we do. Like I will say that, like I was talking to a friend who was talking to somebody at this big conference, and like, oh yeah, I know about office hours. Like there was a whole, and so I think that we might have a pretty good chance of getting the passes that we need. The one thing that I guess what I would say here is that I actually highly recommend against putting anything on the ground. I've done this for 20 years. You want a backpack, and I have not gone bigger. Every conference I cover, I get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, because what happens is that it affects what you cover, and it affects how you cover it. If there's a whole lot of setup and things, and this all becomes it actually, I think part of what makes it work is this kind of flying, we can organize it, but there's a little bit of flying by the seat of your pants, being opportunistic. And the more we build it up, the more we go back to what everybody else is doing. They want to build a little stand, and they want to have this thing, and then they have a bunch of lights that are set up and stuff like that. And I think that it bogs us down a little bit. And I found that, I think that we want to stay light, stay light on this. And I think that we can, because I've done it. I mean, we've had very effective streams with a live view and a camera and a mic, wireless mic with a mic plug. And, you get an electrosonic mic plug, you get a SM58 with someone who knows how to use it. You have, in my case, the last time I did it with that much rig was an EX1 going into a live view. That was it. That was all it was. And we wandered around and people loved it. Excuse me. People loved it. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So yeah, I've pared down as much as possible. I run a monopod with great feet, so I could set it down on the ground and not have to worry about the rig. And I've had my Sony 4K camera on there with audio, with light and everything. And I've only had one person that ran into that rig once, and then I just picked it up and continued on from there. But there's something about picking it up and moving it and going on, because lots of things happen. You could set up for the perfect scene, and then all of a sudden that perfect scene gets bombarded by a whole bunch of people, and then it's not a perfect scene anymore. On the cart aspect, I think you need to have some sort of medical or some doctor's note to actually bring a cart like that on the show floor.
You're good, Chris.
Yeah, back in the 80s, we used to go to Comdex all the time with giant ENG cameras. I think an HL79 weighed like 35 pounds. And that was just the camera, and then the recorder was on my shoulder, and that was another, I don't know what those decks weighed. But yeah, putting stuff on the ground is a problem. And even with the big cameras, it's hard. It's day's work. You'll be tired. But I think putting stuff on the ground is a mistake.
You're good, Bill.
I just wondered, have we discussed the scope of work in terms of how many days we're going to try to do coverage? Are we just doing Friday, or are we going to try to do the whole 3-day weekend? And do we have to come in a day ahead to do meetings and things like that, just in terms of time commitment?
Yeah, my recommendation is that we cover the whole thing, but we go live the second day or the third day, for these, because we want time to look at everything. We want time to to figure out what we want to cover, build up some packages, do some stuff like that. And I think that's the part that I think you want to kind of figure out. That's how I learned to cover these over time, was I never go out on the first day to do anything live. I would do it all. I want a day or two to just absorb stuff, take lots of videos to make that work. But to go back to this though, I think that we can find a way to do a stand. One of those, they look goofy, but the little hang that hangs over your head, and then it sits there. It's just a lot easier for the camera operator. It does look a little goofy, and you run into things every once in a while. The other thing is that when we get back to the blocking, when we talked about it earlier, a lot of times what we got into the habit of, and it's funny, Kevin Hansen, who works for me now, he pointed out this was his first thing he did in Pixel Core with us, was we'd cover Macworld, and we have our camera operator, here, and our host here, and then we usually had someone going to the next booth saying, we're coming to you in the next minute, and if you're not available, we're just going to go to the next booth. Like, we're here to cover you. We're like, we didn't schedule anything. Someone just came. We would tell people roughly, like, oh, we want to come over here in the afternoon. Is that okay? But trying to schedule it exactly is not usually a thing. And if they weren't there and we wanted to cover it, usually the goal is the host just knows enough to talk about it, and then we move on. Like, like it's not, like we just, we show it and then we move on. If someone's not there to talk to, I've said this before, I don't really like listening to people at booths talk unless they are the technical person that works on that thing. I don't need a marketing person or product manager or anything else. That doesn't mean anything to me. So I'd rather absorb the information and just tell it to you and answer your questions. And if I need to, we look at it, maybe pull someone over. It's just way faster. You get a lot more content. And then the other thing that we would do is we usually had 2, sometimes as many as 4 people that would literally block the lane. Like so when with Pixel Core, we had a lot of, because we had 200 people in San Francisco in Pixel Core, so we'd have 8 or 9 people walking around Macworld together. And what we would do is when we stop to do this, there's 2 to 4 people standing on each side, close enough that it's just not comfortable to go, to go between here. That's all we were trying to cut off, is no one goes between the camera and the operator, and they just stay out of frame and they sit there, and literally we would just go, nope. like if someone came in there, and people with a limited emotional dynamic range would get frustrated with us, but otherwise we'd be like, you just need to go this way, just go around, and they'd be like, and then they walk around. There's only 1 or 2 that would get into this like super weird, and then they got to look super weird on a live stream of like, they're going to force their way through, they're not going to be told what to do. It was kind of, I found it fairly enjoyable and funny. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, as far as the time frame goes of like the number of days of coverage, I think it depends on our volunteer team and the response we get from the team. If people are hungry and want to be a part of 2 or 3 days, great. Or if we get a different response, we'll adjust accordingly. But I think what we'll do is have that first meeting, get everybody together, talk through that, and then I might even send out a poll or some sort of response to that. Another thing Courtney pointed out from the NAB stream is the real-time questions, and trying to figure that out, because we want the panelists and our community
I think we have a question. About that
we'll
next.
Save it
So we'll save it. Yeah. Next question.
Alex Forty Goldner in London has this. In Mukana, would it be possible for information associated with the booth or company, a few bullet points, links to sites and videos, that could be grouped somewhere so that the panel can come up with useful questions? Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of press stuff that comes out. In fact, for NAMM, I've already asked for my press credentials, and I'm already getting emails from like Nugan Audio, just sent one today about how they're going to be presenting for NAMM. So you'll get the information, unless they're being very secretive about it beforehand. So there's going to be a lot of material that can be moved over.
Yeah, I think that this is mostly. Yeah, we have to figure out some note structure. Go ahead, Josh.
Well, one of the things that we did with the NAMM coverage is we had a Discord where people showed their interest of what booths that they would like us to cover, and we used that not as a sacrosanct, cover it in order from top to bottom, just as the questions come into Mukana in our general Q&A question, but as a priority list as to what to get to and circumstances, which was helpful in seeing what people's interests were. It was something that allowed us to sort of aggregate this interest ahead of time, get people's attention toward it, get people thinking about, okay, what booths do I want to do? Possibly we could do some type of integration, depending on Mukana's abilities, something that we could think about things ahead of time and have them presented for the panel at the time of discussion.
Yeah, go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. I think thinking of the production as a whole, we had an editing team for NAB, and for OH Space, we had a story team, right? So those departments essentially focused on those specific things. I think we should develop a content team, right? Somebody who is gathering information from press releases and getting that into structured, easy, understandable bites of chunks. And then also, this might be a question for Josh or even Alex, but the thought of like multiple question managers. So maybe they switch off between questions so that, when somebody's on the floor talking to somebody, we get those questions and we have a couple question managers managing those in Mukana easier. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that one of the things I wanted to be able to do is, in this case, be able to just say flush, basically flush the on deck. So the idea is that we bring over a bunch and then potentially promote a group of questions, like search for this, search for sound devices, and then push all of those questions just automatically into the on deck, and then be able to flush it at the end. Like we didn't get to all of the questions, and boom, we flush it out and go to the next one. And so I think that there's some ways that we can kind of put that together to make it a little bit smoother as far as how we handle it in real time. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, that is a problem because, as much as you'd like to think that they're going to publish all the information about new products ahead of time, they don't, because they like to keep things surprising. And a lot of it is serendipity. You discover something, you go to a booth and you say, oh, well, what's new? Well, we have this new thing, that we just announced this morning, and you don't know what it is until they show it to you. So you don't know what the questions are going to be until you see what it is and what it does. So you have to have some way of handling stuff that is not prepared in advance, that we didn't have information in advance, so that the panelists or whoever or the host can ask questions or relay questions that are brought up by the explanation of something we're seeing live.
Yeah, and I will say, I've covered these for a long time. I do very little pre-pro. So we don't want to get too, I think we can get caught up in, there's this thing about pre-pro and everything and trying to research it. I used to do that. And then I got to a point where I mostly walk in and look at what's cool. Like what pops out at me. What do I think I should, this is something that's interesting. This is something, I didn't know that there was a microphone that would go up to 100 kilohertz, and so then I shot a video about that because I was like, that's cool, and so, kind of wandering around almost with, a child's eye on it of what catches my fancy and what do I think is based on my expertise, what do I think is exciting, and then talk about it. And I think that that's something we want to keep leaning into, and it can be all of us suggesting those things, but I think you want someone who's excited about it, talking about it. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, just addressing the Mukana suggestion that Noah made. The last time with NAB, we had someone that managed those questions, moved them on deck. And we did it manually. And Alex, I guess you might know what moderation is already built into the system that we could maybe utilize and see what Mukana already supports for that. But yeah, I think using a system where could be helpful as far as moderation would be helpful for that.
Yeah. I think that there's some stuff in the operator panel that you guys don't use, but that might be useful there. So we'll take a look at how we can expose that and make it easier for you to grab onto those things. Go ahead, Chris.
Noah, you mentioned you had multiple boots on the ground, people already stepping up and volunteering. I think it would be super interesting if you assign one of those groups to just do the little booths. Like your job is to just do the little weird discovery things. Everybody always talks about, the best part about, going to a show is you get to see you just get to stumble on all these things. Fine. We have a whole crew, and that's all they're going to do is find those little things that they stumble upon. And you make it a little segment about it, okay, now let's go to the tiny booth or whatever. You have some cute name for it. Yeah. And you can keep going back to that person.
Yeah. And I really recommend, as we think about these, is that the other thing I learned is that don't do a lot of things that require editing. So get good at, and people should practice it, where you want to get good at just using, for those that's why I got to using a phone all the time. It's because I can go, whoop, look at this. And then I'm going to go this way, and then I'm going to look this way and learn how to do it, because it just, because you're trying to turn things over, you went all those little, like, I now have a close up, and now I have a reverse, and now I have this, and now I have that. And what happens is you just end up producing half the content because it's worthless, if you don't get it done quickly. And so you want to do that. You want to have people that can head and tail it, possibly throw some lower thirds on, possibly throw, those kinds of things, but know that you could just head and tail it and put it out and it'd be fine, and the only thing you may want to do is do a voiceover over top of it. But I usually try to do that while I'm talking. Look at this. This is really cool. And I point at it. And if I don't get it right, I do it again. Like while I'm standing there, I just do it again until I get it. Sometimes 2 or 3 times. That's way faster than loading it in and cutting a bunch of stuff over, trying to cut it all together. And I'm saying this as someone who used to go, well, I'll just fix that in post, and there's a lot of stuff is left behind. Go ahead, Chris.
Did I hear that right? No editing. I'm having issues with this plan.
I think that there's lots of things that can be edited, but when we're covering these booths, I think that we want to try to do it as little as possible. And again, I think that these could be, again, if we have 7 or 8 or 10 people that are on the ground, there's one big crew that's going around with the live view and may swap things out. So it might be like Bill is hosting some of the stuff on the big system, and then but he does that for an hour, and then somebody else takes over for Bill, and Bill goes out and does some of the little stuff that he's interested in. He wants to show us with the iPhone rig or 2 iPhone rigs roaming around. And again, if we just had 2 iPhone kits and a live view with people who knew what they were talking about, covering the event, just finding cool things, it would be the best coverage that's ever happened for NAMM or Cinegear. Like, it just doesn't require that much because no one's putting this kind of effort into it. And you just have to, and again, we want to have a small win that we do really well. And again, the other thing we have to think about is, what is the panel doing? Like, we just kind of reacted to it, but the panel could be talking about things that were announced and things we how do we get that into the pipeline? Yeah. Let's go to the next question, and we'll go, because I think we're going to run out of time really fast. And I have a hard out at 9. Yeah, go ahead.
Next one comes from Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand. He says, planning for, how big will Blackmagic Design's booth be at NAMM? And are they there at all, given the amount of music YouTubers put on YouTube?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
If they are there in any capacity, they'll be in the Sweetwater booth. They'll be in the Adorama booth, the Full Compass booth. These are the manufacturers, but I don't see them on the list of vendors at all for NAMM.
Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I thought that I did see them on the list, but I think that they would be doing Fairlight, so they wouldn't be showing the video stuff. They would be showing the audio consoles.
I could see them doing Fairlight at NAMM and the cameras and such at Cinegear. Next question.
Peter Moore, back in from Auckland, says, if you do cover NAMM, what tech will you cover? Given I'm into guitars, obviously, but also into physical synths and Roland Alesis physical digital drum kits, any new tech with mics, all sorts of things like that.
Go ahead, Noah.
I think it's going to depend on our audience, and that's one of the things we try to do with Discord is get a voting system of like the different vendors that we wanted to cover the most. So Josh, maybe we'll connect and try to figure that out so we can get a poll, because ultimately we're serving an audience and we want to give content and cover the things that are interesting to the folks who are watching.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
And it gets back to what Alex said earlier, trying to get those interviews and things like that. For a good example is Roland. Trying to get an interview with Roland for the show is almost impossible. Sometimes they'll even have a booth where you have to pre-schedule to even just get in to look at the stuff, let alone get any type of coverage on there. So most likely you'll just have to walk in, you'll see a product, and you'll go, hey, let's talk about this product. Here it is right here. And you'll have nobody to reference to. So you have to have some good content, some good text to read as you're going through that product.
I don't read any text either. I just look at it. I rehearse it in my head and then I just spit it out. Like I just, and so you really want to think about how you can make it as efficient as possible. Like for instance, for synthesizers and sequencers and stuff, what we really would benefit from is Nick Batt talking to us about that. So, that's a person where I know he's going and he's got his own stuff to do, but it would be great to have, like when we think about synthesizers, let's have Nick run around with us for an hour about what he thinks is cool. This is the stuff that Nick found. And again, the more we rely on a knowledgeable host to tell us about the gear, the faster this goes. The more you rely on interviewing people, it just grinds you into the ground, and you just want to avoid that unless you get the right person, but that should be like 1 out of every 4 or 5 is you're actually interviewing someone, because those are just grinds, from a pure like content generation process. Go ahead, Noah.
I heard from a friend of mine who's a Roland exec. They're not going to be at NAB, and I believe Fender may not be at NAB.
Oh, and NAMM, you mean?
Sorry. Yes, NAMM.
I'm just using them as an example. I mean, I'm just saying there'll be tons of synthesizers. It might not be Roland,
sure.
but having wandering around with Nick to get his input on the synthesizers is going to be something that would be cool. And we have different people that are into, like Jeffrey talking about some drum stuff, and other people talking about things that they know. Sure. That's an incredible thing. You don't get that in most coverage. Is a bunch of content experts, talking about something.
Yeah, and Jeffrey and I can have a drum off that I'll lose to because he's probably a better drummer than me. But I was going to say, if we do multiple teams, like Alex was saying, we can have the main team. Maybe that could be like the planned team, like with the live view. And then we have the two, different teams with the iPhone rigs that are the sporadic teams that get the small booths, something like that.
It could be. I'm just going to tell you that I as someone, we can do this however you like, but I will tell you, the more you plan it, the more grindy it becomes. Like it is something that you want to respond as best you can, and you want to find great talent that can talk to things. But I kind of watched NAB grind up a little bit, and I just saw my past. And I didn't start that way. I started with booths, and I started with things and big rigs and all this stuff, and it all ended up grinding down to something that was really easy and almost haphazard to capture stuff. But it was really, if we can get that to work really well, the lighter we can go, the better.
Yeah, because you saw where the friction was with the past events you've done, and it sounds like
it just Again, I would have you avoid that if you could. It's one of those things. I think that I just watch the grind, and what happens is it just becomes, you get a lot less content. The content is more static. You sit there and set up and then wait for the person to come out. All this other stuff. When we do it, like a lot of times when we did the live views at NAB, we literally just wandered around, with a backpack and a person and a couple people to block. And we just, let's go look at this. Now we had some ideas and we had runners and stuff like that. It wasn't like we weren't doing anything, and we walked around for 2 days, had a list of what we want to cover in the central hall. It's not like we didn't do any of those things, but we want to be careful of, like, if it wasn't available, just move on to the next thing. And again, when you'd be surprised at how many booths will sort themselves out when they realize that there's hundreds of people watching, and I'm coming to you and we had Liana Lehu with. Liana was our runner that would go ahead, and she's very good at just going, hey, we're going to come here. There's 1,000 people watching or 500 people watching the stream, and if you're ready, we'll talk to you, and if you're not, we're not going to. And then they kind of figure out what they want to do. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, and what we've done in the past, kind of speaking, Alex, to your experience about being spontaneous and not being tied down. What we've done in the past is that we did have a plan, we did have a show rundown, but we were flexible enough that, we had like anchors. So specific things where, especially if you had planned events, if we do reach out and we do have anchors that we're going to do at specific times, we can plan around those things. Right. But our infrastructure was flexible enough to where if that time drifted, we could handle it. If something came up that we weren't expected, we could import it. And we had our infrastructure, we'd like to have our infrastructure to a place to where we're flexible enough to where we can go with the program or we can shift. Yeah,
that's great. As long as we just know that we can, you just always have to remember the map is not the territory. So we want to, okay, there's something here that wasn't on the map. Let's just move around it. And I think that we just want to, I'm not saying we shouldn't plan at all. Like, I do a lot of planning for it, but we just want to make sure that it felt a little, in NAB, felt a little like we were hanging on to a structure a little bit more than I would. But that's really going to be more, I'm giving you my 2 cents, but you guys are going to run it the way you want to run it. For sure. Next question.
Guy Cochran comes up next from Seattle. Infocom is going on the same days as Cinegear. Might we cover both? Throw it from Vegas to Los Angeles and back.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I don't know if you were planning to throw that to yourself there, Guy, but I've got an alternate route here. I've been working on something I can't talk about just yet. So my plan, if everything works out, because this all works out for me, is NAMM's the weekend before. So cover NAMM. I'm going to take a bus, head to Vegas, Infocom. I'm actually speaking at Infocom on the 9th, get on another bus, and then go to Cinegear. That's my whole plan, at least at this point in time. But I'm definitely working with somebody, and possibly we could do a second hour from office hours.
Good guy.
Yeah, I got thrown a curveball yesterday when somebody submitted the PDF to me that showed that we have a booth at InfoComm, and I was like, I was going to Cinegear. Where'd this come from? So all of a sudden, I'm booked in 2 places, and I'm not sure which one I'm going to go to or how to do this. So, but there is a little. So Thursday and Friday look like crossover days. So 9 and 10th are going on at the same time. But InfoComm actually starts the day before Cinegear. But Cinegear runs an extra day over the weekend. So I'm not sure which day would be best to.
My temptation would be to do one day, another day. I'm totally open if there's people that are ready to cover Cinegear. It's just that I don't know if we have enough people on the ground to do it. I'm not Cinegear, InfoComm. I don't know if there's enough people. If we had a team at InfoCon to cover it, I'd be interested. Because I've never actually seen. I'm speaking at InfoCon, but I've never actually seen it. I'm not going to be there. I'm going to do it virtually, but I'm not going to. I don't know what it looks like. I don't have.
I've never been either. I've been to Cinegear and to NAMM, but I haven't been to InfoCon.
I've
so
been there twice.
Yeah.
So it's no different than NAMM.
No, yeah, go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, I mean, it's really about the interest of the audience, right? And like what folks want to see. So we'll have to prioritize, and then time and resources, right? So it depends on our crew too, and our volunteers, what we get.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Who's designing the office hours RV caravan so we can do rolling coverage of all these shows 5 years from now, just going one to the next?
Well, I think that what's funny is that I think that what's going to be interesting is that we're going to have different people at different locations. Like when we cover IBC, which I definitely think we're going to end up covering, it's going to be the Europeans covering it. We're going to have the Europeans taking, they're the ones on the ground, or we're not going to do it. Like, I'm not going to fly people into IBC, Europe, so our members in Europe have to do that one. And in Vancouver for SIGGRAPH, if we cover that, that's going to be hopefully some folks in Vancouver or in Seattle or something going up. So the fascinating part of it is that you have this big virtual group that's working on the content of it. And I think, by the way, if you're virtual and you can't come in, you shouldn't think that you can't do it. There is so much we could produce if we have a huge crew offsite editing things, putting, like, for instance, those ideas of, hey, we're going to just cut something. It's a single take. And I said, no editing, but it would be great to add graphics and lower thirds and all kinds of things that make it pop, is stuff like there. The idea is that we have a core piece of content that we can head and tail and put out. But if we have time and we have enough online resources, we could sit there and add all the cool things that make it even better. Next question.
Jeff Keithley in Texas is the bigger question. What's the goal of doing this coverage from something like NAMM? An audio-centric show?
Noah?
My goal would be for us to get chances to practice, right, and get our craft in, but also to connect the audience to the event, right, at a global scale.
Yeah, and go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say exactly what he was saying. It's iteration. It is learning how to do it. It's solving problems so the show gets better and better. And you can take this idea of a show and take it to almost any conference or industry or event or happening or whatever if you know enough people who know how to do it.
And I'll argue that audio is more than half of the show. So us covering what's happening with audio and music and everything else is really, really key. So us getting smarter about this and what's out there, I think, is super important, and probably as important or more important in some cases than NAB. Go ahead, Jeffrey, real quick.
OWC will most likely be there. There'll be a whole bunch of lighting there. There'll be many different opportunities for us.
I knew nothing about lighting. Now I'm buying all these movers and laser. I have lasers now.
There'll be a whole hall of lighting and fog machines and everything.
Lasers and fog machines. Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking. I just filled a space with haze and then put lasers and movers in there. So awesome. I'm really excited about it. All right, next question.
Jeff Keithley in Texas says, is consistency in gear important? In our live shows, it is.
Go ahead, Josh.
I think there are some things that you're going to want in, when you say gear, I'm assuming you're talking about the field reporting. We talked about having the interaction with people in the panel or in the studio. So having a way for them to see the panel, and so having something to look back, a viewer to see them, would be helpful for that. Maybe if we have some of our lighter crew, maybe they would just be armed with iPhones and be lighter. So I don't think that uniformity is necessarily helpful for this, but for some of the things that we would like to see in the as far as the equipment side, might be helpful to figure that out and prepare ahead of time, just so that we know that this contribution is solid.
Yeah, go ahead now.
My personal bias is in agreement with Keithley. Like I would send out, I have FS5s, right? And I have 5 of them. So I would send those out for each kit and just keep the cameras the same. I think the limiting factor though is the live view system, right? So if our secondary and tertiary teams are only iPhone based or like, one SIM card based, then that's going to change what we do as far as those kits and what they look like.
Yeah. And I don't think that, I think that, I think that we have one main one, and then we may have one that is the interactive one, that is the one that we build up so that we can try to talk to some folks. And then we have one or two, we fill out the rest of them with these iPhone rigs. I think that if we go down that path, I think we end up with a better situation where we're, but each rig is specifically designed by us, all of us, of like, this is the mission for this rig. This is the mission for that. And we build it and we get the best components that we can for it. These kits are not very complicated. It's not that expensive to rent it. like it's not like we can, if a couple of us, if people who want to throw a little money in, we're building up the page on office hours. If you want to donate some money to this cause specifically, it'll probably be enough to rent the equipment that we need to make that work. Renting this kind of equipment is not super expensive, except for the live view, which is really expensive, which is why we're talking to somebody about it. Go ahead, Bill.
I think you're on exactly the right track, which is one core system that is dependable. It is more sophisticated. It is bonded and all the rest of those things. So whatever you face, you get a signal out. And then these fabulous little external rigs, if we can work it out so that somebody's phone can contribute, those just give you so much more capability.
Jeffrey, real quick, we're going to try to start buzzsawing through these questions.
Yeah, I would say iPhones is probably not the best thing. iPad minis, that's where I would actually go. And there's many reasons why we can talk about later.
I think the problem is the cameras are way better on the iPhone, like dramatically. Next question.
Mickey Macacor in Philippines says, we will have correspondents that are very familiar with the topic. Will we have correspondents that are very familiar with the topic at hand? NAMM being music related and Cinegear being film equipment related, not live broadcast production.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, one possible thing to do for any of our correspondents who are going to be out there is go to someplace like Cinegear has streaming online right now. Surf the Exhibits Day 1, Surf the Exhibits Day 2, which are 2 or 3 hour videos that are posted now online. You can view them free, and it'll give you an idea of what it was last year at Cinegear, what kind of equipment's there, what the exhibitors are, and what you're going to be faced with. So that might be a good place to start. And there might be a similar streaming of last year's NAMM show as well, touring the booths, and it might trigger you with some interest into what type of equipment that we might be interested in.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
The best part of one of the NAMM shows that I did was we were doing an interview with Chris Poland of Megadeth, and then all of a sudden he said, hey, can I just introduce you to other people? Next thing you know, Chris Poland was walking with us doing interviews of other musicians and other gear. So it'll work. It's awesome.
That'd be fun. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, and I think that I know that we have some folks that have signed up that know their subject really well in these areas, and we're going to try to find more of those folks. And once we know what the kits are and how many people are going to be on the ground, I might reach out to a few people that are going to be there and see if we can't add to what we have there. Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, can we budget for the hire of a real location sound mixer this time?
No. And here's why. If some people are paid and some people aren't, the whole thing unwraps. Like paying, it has to be, we're covering the costs, and we have to have people who are willing to do it because they want to be part of this. The mixing and matching of that will be super complicated, and we won't be sustainable. But what I will say is that I also think that we keep it simple enough that we don't need a very complex sound mix. I have found again that I've done this by myself with an SM58, and good mic skills covers a lot of issues. The problem we have to have is that we have to be able to we have to practice it a bit. Make sure that it's well set up, but then the person who's running it has to do what they need to do. And again, I don't like lots of mics when I'm covering these events. So there shouldn't need to be a sound mixer, because there should be one mic. Like in my opinion, there's one mic that we're using. And the most important thing is the talent knows what to do with it. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I think anybody who's been to a big show knows just what a mental drain it is to be in that audio space for too long. And one of the beauties of what we're doing is that we can leave the show floor and go to the anchors who are you know, a relief both audio and visually, and then they can comment about what we've heard. Oh, now we're going back to the show. I mean, I think that's a really key thing. And yeah, you're right. One might do it right.
And if someone wants experience of being a field mixer, who we give them the right equipment, we work through the things, we test it. We're open to having people do that and sit there and work through sound devices, you know, whatever. We can sort that out. So if someone wants the experience to do it and they have some background to do it, and, you know, but we have to have backups for that. Again, we will not be creative about equipment. Just want to make sure we're clear. Like there's going to be this will be an SM58 with a mic plug. You know, like there's not any other option in my opinion, because I've done this forever and that's the thing that works. You know, it has high off-axis rejection. It is solid. You can drop it and it connects, and it'll be something like either most likely electrosonic, you know, connection. It's not going to, you know, we're not going to mess around with audio with that. I think that's what we had the biggest challenge with in NAB, was just things that didn't work out that way. But I think that we can kind of sort through that. You were going to say something, Courtney?
I was going to ask real quick, would noise assist help with just general crowd noise?
Nope, not very much. No, but it doesn't matter. The SM58 does. Like if you set the SM58 to the right gain so that you have to be close, you don't hear anything else. Like I have been standing in front of like booming booths and you barely hear them, but that means that you have to eat it. Like, you know, and the one thing that the host will hear from me all the time, if I don't know if I'll be talking to them, but is eat the mic. Yesterday I was talking to someone, eat the mic, you know, and that's the biggest thing, is having the talent. It's not the sound engineer, but the talent doing what they need to do. And we're just, you know, whoever's going to be in front of camera, we'll just have to be super conscious of that. Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'm just wondering who has Lectrosonics here that's a volunteer that would bring that stuff. I mean, the guys don't only just come with the gear, with 30 grand worth of gear, they come with 30 years of experience. And so that experience is having gear like a Betso RF Sharky that'll be able to reject everything but the spectrum that you want. And so having that kind of gear, it makes it all go away when you're thinking about it, when you just hire somebody that's external that we don't know for $1,000 and we get it. We get a polished piece, because that was the biggest challenge with NAB, was just audio wasn't very good.
Well, number one is we can rent Electrosonics for not very much, you know, to have them there. Maybe I'm missing something, but I've covered tons of events where I literally walked over to the Electrosonic booth and they lent me one, but I put it in and I did what I needed to do, and I didn't have a single hit all day, and all I did was turn it on. You know, like, and I move the frequency. You know, the first thing I do when I open up a transmitter is I move from wherever it is to somewhere else. And so, because I just don't want to be on what everybody else is on. The biggest thing with most coverage is almost all of it's done with Sennheisers. So the 100s are the most popular ones. And so they step on each other all the time. If we use other frequencies and we use other equipment, we almost always sit more. You basically want to get more expensive equipment that not everybody can get easily, and you sit outside of that pretty quickly, in my experience. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney. Can't hear you, Courtney.
Sorry, that was what I was going to point out. Yeah, frequency coordination at big events like that is either non-existent or iffy at best, and I would advise using a cable on your microphone, or at least have one as a backup. Because
absolutely
get stepped on instantly, and a lot of booths are transmitting a lot of strange stuff and a lot of strange frequencies at that, and you have no control over any of it.
We'll always have I will never do a wireless mic without a wired backup. I can tell you great stories about that someday. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, and I switched out my SM58s. I got the Audio-Technica AT8004L long microphone, because the one thing happens is you put a microphone in front of somebody's face, the first thing they do is this, and I don't want that to happen.
Yeah, you have to close that gap. In my opinion, it's like
absolutely, yeah.
So that's
what the long microphone does.
Okay. Next question.
Next question comes from Noah Sargent, Fullerton. Let's talk about boots on the ground kits.
I think we're not going to have time. We'll put this into next week. We'll talk about the kits. Next question.
Might we have a mini office hours running so that we have a panel to discuss new products just seen, or booths just visited as a filler, just in case? That comes from Roscoe Jones and Bray.
Yeah, no, I think that what we're going to do is the panelists will have their own content. That's the thing that I think we can add to this, instead of having Noah did great work on NAB where he was doing these images and there was lower thirds and we played out this little video. But I would rather just see the panelists talk about that, bring those images up, talk to them, talk about those things, so that we don't have to do that post-production for it. And so there can be tons of content and press releases and other things that are talked about by the panel, while the live coverage is really sticking to the ground. Bill, real quick.
And I was just going to say, there was the question about, do you have to be an expert to interview somebody? But if we can get any kind of little text of the questions from the audience, they become the experts, and that's even better than whoever's asking.
Absolutely. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. Would Lyrics with SRT and SRT return be better than Zoom for the iPhone kit?
Go ahead, Guy.
It would be better, but because of the infrastructure that we already have built here, I would say let's just run with what we know and let's just keep doing it through Zoom.
Yeah. Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle. Is there an example of who has done a good or great job on something similar that we can model after?
You can decide whether you like the stuff that I've done in the past. So I'm happy to, if you go back to my site and you look at the old YouTube things, you can go back and see some of my rough. They look very rough, but the thing is a lot of people like just watching them because they got the information. And that's what we want to make sure of, is that we don't get too caught up in, as people who do this all the time, we can get caught up in too high quality. But I think that I will admit that I made stuff that I wanted to watch, like that's, and I find two people standing in front of a camera with a light I will almost always turn it off. It's like, okay, like I just needed to move really fast, between things and do Q&A and so on and so forth. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I've done stuff that I wish I could take back. I got a video. I got a video from NAB Loop Deck. It's actually going to be publishing later today. I think it's one of my best ones coming from that DJI Osmo Pocket 2.
Nice. Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Brea, back again. Many companies will release new product videos before the show. How might we use those videos?
This is where I think we could cut that content in with the panelists talking about it. So when they release those videos, we may cut them up or we may do whatever we're going to do and talk about them. But stuff released ahead of time and stuff, I think we use that. We might cover it and show it in person, but I don't think we do anything that isn't like we're showing things at the show. The ground crews show things at the show. Releases and bigger videos are all done, and the panel covers that and just talks about it. I think it'd be great. Next question.
Harshit in Daytona Beach. Can you share what to expect from the 3 events, Infocom, Cinegear, and NAMM?
Infocom, in my opinion, and Jeffrey can correct me, I feel like it's kind of a NAB for corporate. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's about
Corporate
right. So
NAB.
it'll be close to like NAB, same booth structure. North Hall, West Hall is going to be the coverage area. So it's.
Cinegear is really about, I think that Cinegear is basically the central hall at NAB, the old central hall in NAB. It's all the cool things that are eye candy of us shooting things. Like this is how we actually, the camera and the gear and the jibs and the stuff like that. There's a lot of eye candy at Cinegear, and I've been there for a decade because I'm always working. But it's amazing. Go ahead, Jeffrey. Oh, I'm sorry.
And the other thing,
Courtney.
go ahead.
I was going to say that, typically NAMM is mostly musical instruments and support for live gigging, things like that, audio, some lighting, but mostly that kind of stuff. Cinegear is geared more toward grip and electric equipment, some camera equipment, but not near as much. There's some camera manufacturers there, but mostly in how to mount those cameras. So you'll find a lot of stuff on jib arm, lots of jib arms and steady cams and lighting gear, a lot of lighting gear. So it's geared mostly toward that support. Yeah. And Infocom is more projectors. If you're looking for projectors or live event video walls, digital signage, a lot of that stuff appears at Infocom. So it's more AV equipment at Infocom, more professional camera support and lighting gear at Cinegear, and NAMM is, of course, for musical instruments and musicians.
Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. Why an iPhone kit rather than an iPad kit? I think we addressed that.
Yeah, I agree that the camera's sharper on the iPhone, but when I was building out my rig for NAB, which I didn't go to, but the kit that I had has the USB-C port on the iPad so that I could put the mix pre into Zoom. This just detects it detects it as a USB input, and so you get these XLRs, and then you also get the USB power, which is nice. So I designed the whole thing around those 2 items and the military grade cage from Axoon that also had a battery in it.
Yeah. the biggest issue for me is that it's just that the camera is so much better on the iPhone than the iPad. And if the iPad was closer, I'd be more likely to do it. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Plus, for NAB, we had these Mr. Net boxes that we had to worry about. So I had an Android phone, so I could use the USB-C, so we could bring Ethernet in to play.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, how will we manage RF congestion at large shows like these?
It's when everyone is going right, take a left. Almost everybody that covers these I haven't done it for a couple of years, but almost everybody uses Sennheiser ENG microphones, the ones under $1,000 that are covering it. They all sit there and live on each other. I mean, they're just cutting into each other all the time because most of them don't have any experience. So they all have them on the same frequency that they bought them in. And they're just sitting on top of each other and crossing and everything else. When you get electrosonic, when you get something that's higher end, you very rarely have that. And you do switch channels. You can move the channels around, and you can get an RF. We'll look at whether we bring like an RF Scout, because we can very quickly on an Android phone, to Jeffrey's point, view the RF pretty quickly and figure out where we need to be. Next question.
Roscoe Jones, do we have a contact for exhibitor badges or press?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
NAMM's going to be a tougher one because NAMM is actually a closed event. It's not open to the public. Maybe some of the after events are, but for the most part, I have precedence. So like I said, I applied for my press badge on there. See, I don't know about Cinegear. I have a press badge for Cinegear that I can get if I wanted to, but yeah.
We'll reach out to their press thing. We'll see what we can do. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, Roscoe's idea of a mini office hours panel on site sounds interesting, but wouldn't it be compromising our high audio video quality standards to have the panelists on the show floor?
Oh, I wouldn't put them on the show floor. We don't need to do that. Like, we can just have a panel. Like what we, among any group out there, does not need is we do not need to be on site to sit in a round table and talk about things. So that's definitely not something we'll do. I mean, having scouts running through the whole thing, but that would so limit us to who could make it to LA. That would not be something we'd want to do. Because what we really want is when we go to the lighting area, we want Tlaloc to be talking about what we're looking at. And when we go to if we go into some of the music areas, we want, if we can get Greg and Mickey and other people and Courtney and other folks to be commenting on those things while we're doing it. It's what's incredible about what we can do here, if we get this right, is that we can have this huge brain trust talking with those specialties, talking about the stuff that the cameras are showing up. It's not all about the content generated by the cameras, by the people in front of the cameras. It's about this huge brain trust that can add context to that, which I think is really exciting. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, kind of right along those lines. Quality is great. We'll do as much quality as we can when we can get it. But sometimes the opportunity and something that being able to capture a moment shouldn't prohibit us from going somewhere if the megapixels aren't up or things aren't exactly pristine. Sometimes the moment is helpful to capture, and we're not going to compromise when we don't have to. But sometimes the moments are more important than just focusing on high def and those type of things.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I think that if we can get the live view if we can get that to work, it will stun people. Like with a 4K, output and everything else, it'll be something no one's ever seen before. And I've got some ideas. And again, that one will be the kind of the high end rig that we're trying to experiment with. Like how much quality. Like for instance, the Office Hours channel is capable of 5.1 now. so the in YouTube, and so and again, between now and then, we should start experimenting with what does it take to broadcast it, and what does it take to do multi-channel. I don't even know if the live view can handle that. It might be 2-channel only. So those are the kind of things we'll kind of try to figure out. So stay tuned for that. All right. Good talk. We'll be talking about this every week, so think about it some more. We'll talk about this. And we're going to start talking about WWDC as well. So a lot of our next month is talking about how we're going to handle all these things, mixed in with some great guests. So stay tuned for that. All right. Thank you so much. I want to take a time. I just have to say, not being here for the last 2 days and having it run great, and watching a little bit of on YouTube, I just want to underline just the amazing thing that we're doing here. Like the back end crew that's managing people coming in and getting this to work, and dealing with, crashing on Monday, I guess, and dealing with all the other things. It's just an incredible thing. Like, it's just, I think when I walk away from it for a second, because, for me, it's a day to day, every day. And when I step away from it for a minute and I look at it, it's just what everyone here, the panelists, the producers, the folks on the back end, just a stunning thing. Like, it's amazing. So anyway, just really well done. That's all. I was just really struck by that over the last couple of days when I was watching from the outside. So I just kudos, and the panel looks so good, and the stuff is starting to really work well, and it's just and I just love that there's this regular team you come into the as a panelist. I mean, when we look back at what it was like only a year ago or 2 years, especially 2 years ago, wow, like and I had somebody who works on pretty high end events jump in. We were talking about it, and they looked at this and they were like, that quality is amazing. Like, for this kind of show, they were just blown away by what we're doing. And so anyway, I just want to thank everybody for their contribution. The folks that are working on this every day, the panelists, the producers. It's just an amazing thing. All right. Now we're going to jump into After Hours. Oh, it's coming up so fast now. Look at all these people that put this thing together.
But you compliment them, they're going to be on the point now.
Oh, I see how this works. I didn't think of that, but okay. Hi, Mitchell. We love to talk the way Mitchell likes to listen to us, very quiet. No, we don't want to get... Hi, Mitchell.
The previous has been an Office Hours production.
This has been a Mitchell moment.